Welcome to part 2 of this installment of What's Eating Us with Maverick Citizen. Please do enjoy.
What is the certification process?
Well, the certification process is labor standards that they're meant to meet, and then the farm is meant to operate with those principles in play. And then an auditor comes once a year, and then they investigate whether the farm has met those standards. So that auditing process, that's flow cert, which is an independent auditor, but that process is many ways in which that process can has flaws.
Yeah.
So for example, it just comes once a year,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
not throughout the year. And so how would you really get a sense of
what's happening throughout the year?
The workers report that the only time they see PPE or toilets in the vineyards, all of those things is when the auditors come in.
And they know at which time they're going to be coming in so they can prepare for that.
And the auditors also, the workers report that that in some cases the farmers actually tell them what to say when the auditors are present.
And again, there's that whole intimidation because you're going to do what you're told, otherwise
you go back to being fired and homeless. And so that would be my experience with the certification bodies. Our experience with the Department of Employment and Labor was a lot more constructive recently. So we've been sitting, myself and Daniel, and who does the labor rights program, and Katrina, we was like sitting with like over 100 cases that are just going absolutely nowhere. And many of the places it falls through is that the inspectorate that has to deliver reports, and getting the inspectorate onto the farm to deliver quality reports was like pulling teeth. Beginning of the year we were incredibly frustrated, but this May month, Workers' Month, we had 3 protest actions simultaneously in 3 weeks. It was very intense, and I suppose all the frustration and the anger, and if you don't get the inspectorate to produce the report that you were injured on duty, then you can't get compensation from COIDA. So it all gets stuck, and they have the keys. So I suppose women took to the streets, and in that complete and utter genoeg is genoeg, enough is enough, the Department of Employment and Labor has responded quite positively. So we met with Minister Met, who's the Minister of the Department of Employment and Labor in Ceres. She had a stakeholder engagement with the sector, and Women on Farms Project was one of the stakeholders, and they've committed to these vacancies that were empty. They've committed to filling up those vacancies. Each of the departments have responded in her unit, like the UIF has responded with, okay, so this is the plan, this is how we want to move forward. We've had meetings with the labor centers where the women visit, which is Paul, Worcester, De Dorings, Stellenbosch, and they've also committed to improving the services. We've had a one-on-one with the inspectorate, the Labour Rights Inspectorate, Ms. David Iso, and we've worked out a very comprehensive plan on how we will communicate. They've also committed to forming a working group with Women on Farms Project around the cases that we submit to them. Once a month meeting, aligning the cases up with this is what we've done, and feedback. So that has been quite positive. So those were the ideas. Now we're in the next phase of it, which is now the action phase of it. So we'll see what can get done working with the Department of Labor, but it's great to know that at least there is, like, it's a hard-earned victory from the women, because they really clawed it from out of nothing.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't there before. Like with the tribunal, the Department of Labor wouldn't even acknowledge receipt. But now there's a much more collaborative relationship, and the women will hold the department accountable to their words.
Yeah, so I just want to speak about that because I mean a lot of the stuff that we're discussing is around labor conditions, right? And when you talk about the inspectorate and the work that the inspectorate does this extend to going onto farms and seeing the conditions under which workers are working and all of those kinds of things? And has that actually happened? And
Yes, it does. It does. That is what the inspectorate. So it's the inspectorate's duty to ensure compliance. So if you just take pesticides, for example, it's the inspectorate. If there is non-compliance in pesticide use, it is the Department of Employment and Labor that has to issue non-compliance or stop operations, and you can get a penalty, and there can be a jail sentence. But that's Department of Labor that is to churn out that mechanism. So you can't skip that step and go to SAPS because they're going to refer back to the law. So a lot of it sits with the Department of Employment and Labor. In terms of the inspectorate, it would be best if you ask the Neil. She can give you a better sense of the full lay of the land. But at the beginning of the year, the protest action we ran is that the inspectorate is a sham. I think that Katrina, no, the inspectorate is a sham. Is that we were experiencing great difficulty to get the inspectorate onto a farm. When the inspectorate comes to the farm, in a few of the cases, the inspectorate only spoke to the farmer and would speak to the farmer's appointed person and didn't actually speak to the complainant that made the case, investigated the case. So they put in the case, for example, of pesticide injury on duty, damage to abrasions to the skin. But then would not actually speak to the person, the complainant, would leave the farm without speaking to the complainant. So that's why
how is the process complete if you're not going to speak to the person who has the issue?
Invalid.
Yeah.
So it's an invalid process, and that's why we were saying it's a sham. And we're hoping that with the work that we put in to get the inspector to recognize the faults, we're hoping that going in future that the quality of inspections would improve. And they've also committed to conducting blitzes, which is basically uninformed visits as opposed to informed visits. Because when they inform the farmers, then the workers report, for example, now all of the pesticide empty containers are being shipped far into the mountains so that nobody can see. And then all of a sudden the PPE is taken out of their containers and being put out.
So the PPE does exist. They're just not giving it to people.
Yes.
I mean,
but and then the signage would come up and the toilets would come in.
Yeah.
So they report when you give the farmers that when you make an appointment, things shift around.
Yes.
For that moment. So we've been asking for blitzes so that it's unannounced, so that you get a sense of the real situation.
Yes.
And we also working with them. We flagged that it's going to be season time soon. They're going to start spraying end of July, August. They're going to start with Dormex, which is the growth regulator. And so we flagged with them that in real time we're going to get given information that workers are being sprayed upon and that they are breaking safety protocols, and that we would like them on that day to inspect that farm. And they were open to the possibility and to the possibility of working. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that
just interested like what they were thinking the entire time. Like how effective they thought they were being, until you're like, no, please stop announcing your visits. Can you just do a blitz so that, because people would not be complaining if there wasn't an issue. Surely they should have picked up a pattern that people complain, but when we come to the farm there's seemingly nothing wrong. You know, how can multiple people be saying the same thing consistently, but when you come to the farm magically everything is fine?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like restaurants are a lot closer, so the distance is a factor, but they do blitz restaurants.
Yeah.
They just come in unannounced to check the employment status of the waitrons and the restaurant staff.
Yeah. I just want to go back to this, the issue again around labor practices and people's experience of that, and this issue of wages, and what is considered to be a living wage, what is considered to be fair, and also the fluctuations, because just by the interviews we had between today and yesterday, it seems as though people earn differently, and if it's raining, then people don't earn money, and then 1 week you earn 1,600, the next week you earn 1,800. There's no consistency with how do you plan your life, and how do you kind of standardize something like that, because invariably the people who seem to be coming up short are the workers themselves, right? So I mean, what would you want to say around that?
Yeah, so precarious labor.
Yes.
It's precarious. So as you heard, if it's raining, then there's nobody working, and if nobody's working, then you won't get paid. Okay, no work, no pay, we understand that. But
do we understand it?
Well, that's the law. Let's just say, okay,
If you have a contract with somebody and this person works for you,
yes,
there's nothing. It's something that's beyond their control.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it's literally interpreted that when you don't work, you don't get paid, and there isn't enough of the power relations are what's at stake here, and it's because of the inequality inherited from colonization, maintained in apartheid, entrenched in our post-democratic democratic era, that the farmer can say no work, no pay, and then you don't earn an income. It's devastating, because if you were here last week, it was raining the whole week.
Yes, exactly.
It just let up on, it was the whole week, and so there's no income that's coming into that household, and there's very little, given the power relations, that person can do about it. And it goes back to that point of yours, there's no care, there's no compassion, there's no connection. And why would there be a connection, given that apartheid created all these boundaries that was never truly addressed?
But also, how does the system within which, the labor system within which these people exist, also entrench that, right? Because there should be some sort of mechanisms, to kind of ensure that a person doesn't lose out on a week's wages because it's raining. There's nothing you can do about that. Because it's kind of, I work in an office.
Yes.
If I'm not able to get to the office because some, natural disaster has happened or whatever it is, they're not going to dock my pay for a week because I'm not able to get to the office. Because I have an existing contract and I have protections around that. So it's a similar thing in this instance. Why do you get penalized for something that's beyond your control? So again, the care is not even just about the farmer, it's also about the Department of Labor.
Yes. And those are the enforcers. And if you look at construction, for example, it's very regulated, and you cannot use bitumen in certain, like when the wind speeds go over, let's say 15, then you're not allowed, and that's shut down. They will not mess with those regulations.
Yeah.
But that's because it's tightly regulated. Whereas farms, it's not. And the farmers can act with complete impunity. They can make up their own rules.
Yeah.
And they will say, this is my farm, only my rules count. They can work with the law creatively. They can completely abandon the law, and they can do so because they operate with impunity, because there's no tight net watching, enforcing the law. And the Department of Labor would say that they are stretched and that they don't have the resources. But in the absence of the Department of Labor ensuring that the farmers actually comply with the law, who's going to do it?
Yes.
At the end of the day, that is your constitutional mandate, and then the workers have to bear the brunt.
Yeah.
Which is why we went for the alternative model of the tribunal, because of the situation, especially with pesticides, is that no matter how hard you try to get the departments involved and to act in a socially just or progressive manner, we were just not making much headway. And so the tribunal is an alternative form of justice. No, it has no legal standing per se, but it acted like a court. And the complainants, the workers took to the stand and shared their stories, and they shared it. They were the knowledge bearers more so than the doctors or the activists, and they were able, because in many times, it's almost like farm workers are being gaslit. Yeah. They're like, am I really working with very dangerous substances? The farmer will say, it's just water.
Yeah. If it was bad, surely you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, so that wouldn't be that bad. Yeah. That these people they're making it up. It's too. Yeah. No. Yeah. So then they got to share, and they got to realize that they're not making it up, that their experiences are valid. And it offered an alternative it offers that care, connection, justice framework that's missing
Yeah.
from the sector, from the farmers, from the government. Steerhuisen used the argument of food security for pesticides, and to which, as the tribunal, we like to say is like, why do we need to poison our environment and our people and our water supply and our soil to make food? That in itself is a problematic assumption. So, like, first of all, why must we poison ourselves to make food? And then second of all, if you look at food security is not about the quantity. We're wasting up to 10 million tons of food in the country, yet people are hungry. So food security has got to do with prices of the product, and has got to do with levels of income. And the prices of the product, we must hold our supermarkets to account for the prices. ShopRite, Checkers, Woolworths, Pick n Pay, Spar. And there's a lot of like wiggle room there. There's a lot of like there's a lot of space for cost, the price of production, the price of food to decrease. And then when it comes to income, that has to do with advocating for better wage, higher wages, and social grants. Our social grants is the system is very important, without which the center wouldn't hold. But at the same time, it's desperately too little to feed a family healthily. Then you've still got stationery, and you've got toiletries, and you've got transport, and all of it's like it's a no-win situation. And I suppose that's where we have to put the pressure to force the ShopRites of the world to care, again the issue of care.
Yeah.
And to raise the social grants, and to like something has to give. Food can't be this expensive, yet you're living off the child support social grant. That can only lead to devastating consequences.
Yeah, I want to go back to this whole issue of like the caring and the importance of social grants, and what social grants are actually meant to be doing, right? Because there's a lot of emphasis. It's like, you get a social grant so that you can go out and find a job, and you can feed your family. And those are kind of like the primary things that people kind of look at. And I remember somebody somewhere say, people are more than just workers, and you're also not alive just to like eat and fill your stomach. And sometimes you fill your stomach with absolute rubbish. It's not even healthy for you, but just something to kind of make you not feel hungry. And I wonder which part of the conversation that this kind of fits into, that you have to, in order for you to really care about somebody, you have to look at the person in their totality, not just to be like, here's some food, just shut up. Or here's a job, shut up, because in this instance you've got a job, shut up, you get 1,800 maybe every 2 weeks, but that's not enough, so you kind of like, how do you look at a person as a full being who has a right to be here, and that a social grant is kind of about validating that,
We have a campaign at Women on Farms Project called the Feminist Reparation Campaign. And in that campaign, we advocate for a minimum wage. And we say a minimum wage is, yes, it's the rands and cents and being able to afford, but it's also, a minimum wage is also land redistribution, education, quality education, as well as healthcare. So if you knew the state was providing quality healthcare, then you wouldn't need your income to cover that, or school fees. And if you have, again, it will always go back to the central issue of land and the absence of transformation around land. But if you had a permanent, this was your home, this is where you were staying, you could grow roots, you could grow, like you're saying, you could become more than just a worker, you could become more than just an eater, you could live there, you could grow roots there, you can become creative there. And so then with that, we say we want a wage that covers basics, but we also, in addition, a wage that considers land redistribution, healthcare as well as healthcare. But then I suppose like we need a new kind of medicine. We need a new kind of completely. That's why, like, you need a new kind of agricultural system.
Yeah.
And one based on more loving values.
Yes.
More kind, caring attitudes towards even the environment and the people. And so you are asking for the end of pesticides, but you're actually asking to set aside that whole entire model and rethink the whole plan all from over again.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of kind, caring, I'm just reflecting on this morning when we were talking about this farm being sold and it's sold, workers and all.
Yeah.
And just that phrasing for me is just sitting in my head as so deeply problematic, because there's a dehumanization that happens there. Like, the worker is not a person. It's like a machine. It's like selling a tractor with your
effect of production.
Yeah, effect of production. It's just a thing, an inanimate object. And obviously, it's this kind of attitude that informs the kind of relationship that you have with the workers, and that,
Again, it's like all of the compromises that were made and all of the issues that were not resolved lives deeply embedded inside of commercial farming. And it's so far geographically isolated. Like, if you didn't take an interest in it now, you'd never know that that's existing. You'd never know that that's actually like the depth of poverty on farms and the depth of desperation that women are experiencing. And I mean, you were there with the farmer when he came and violently attacked us.
Yeah.
So, and that's their daily experience.
Yeah. And this is also why I was saying that, when you're also so far from kind of urban centers, you're kind of out of people's imagination. Like, nobody thinks about you.
No.
And people always think about like these happy images of like, farming. It's like, all the farmers are happy, and
smoke billowing from a chimney.
Yeah, exactly.
Birds cheeping.
Yeah, the little chickens running around. It's like this idyllic
Vineyards,
kind of setting. Yeah,
yes.
But you never think of kind of like the underbelly of that. That kind of goes with all the glitters. But it's just, I really. And I think it's also like a challenge for people to also kind of constantly push the curiosity around things, that you don't just kind of take everything at face value, like what you're saying, what's on your plate every night, it deserves a deeper interrogation. And even with me, before I started really doing like the food justice work, I didn't interrogate food systems and, the agriculture industry and those kinds of things. Or even like ultra processed foods, everybody loves the KFC, but what is KFC actually doing to your body, and how is that contributing to the public health crisis that we actually have? Like, nobody makes those immediate kinds of connections, but you kind of get there by pushing yourself in that curiosity and kind of asking what's behind all of this, and who are the people involved in the production of all of this, and the conditions of their contributions.
Yeah, and who benefits.
Yeah.
And how much do they benefit from? Yeah, like, we, as part of the feminist reparation campaign, we advocate for a wealth tax. So we're saying that it is possible, there's an untapped revenue source, a wealth tax, and we can use that wealth tax for quality healthcare, for schooling, for land redistribution. And like, I mean this, the inequality is staggering in this country. It's like so many levels. But I know that Johan Rupert is the richest man in the country in January. He was worth about 7.2 billion US dollars. And then you like match that up with Charmaine, who, if they told her tomorrow we've got a job for you, would drop everything and move to work on it, because it guarantees her at least a 1-2 at the end of the week, versus 7.2 billion.
Yeah.
I think that we've lived in this country for so long that what we think it's probably just, we're so used to it, we've normalized the inequality.
Yeah.
But if you think on it a bit longer, then it's very abnormal. And those were the interventions that weren't made post-apartheid. Like, for example, the land redistribution, the taxation system, and the social welfare system. Those three things go a long way to reducing inequality.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the nail on the head. I write about this almost every week around, how inequality is so normal, you don't even see it anymore.
Yeah.
You're just existing within the system. That's just how things are.
Yeah, and it's like you are complicit despite the best of intentions, because there are people that are hungry at the robots.
Yes.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah. And you just avert your eyes. And then, you kind of continue driving, and if anything, actually, it's kind of more of an irritation for those people to be like, why are these people like constantly begging at the robots? And it's, why do you think?
But that's what hunger looks like.
Yes.
In the country, when we upset, when we read it on paper, it's the little boy that's begging for anything on the street corner. And that has no one and nothing. No one's caring for them and nowhere to go to.
Okay. Anything else you feel that you need to add?
So, at Women on Farms Project, we have a campaign. It's called In the Double Standards campaign, and you can get it on our Facebook account. You can get it on the Instagram, on the socials. Also at the mandla.mobi, that's our partner we work with. So we ask everyone to please sign the campaign to In the Double Standards around pesticide use. And I suppose wherever you are, let's do the work. Yeah, let's do the work where you are. You know what needs to be done. Your heart has told you it has to be done. You know it needs to be done.
Yeah.
The time to do that is now. I mean, the world is where it is, and it gives you a sign that we're running out of time. So it's time to do the work that you know needs to be done, because your heart's been telling you to do it. Do it, because it all makes a difference, and when we put it all together, it will be change.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's a great note to end off on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again for coming and for caring.
Join us again next week for a brand new episode of What's Eating Us.